Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hello to everyone. I hope you are taking care of yourself wherever you are. This pandemic that we are currently having. Today, I would like to share this video with you and share my reaction. As you know, the world is currently going through a pandemic, that is coronavirus. And I was just looking through my YouTube channel and trying to look through some inspirations on how we can go through such trying moments in our life. I've got this video from Dr. Yasir. It's titled How Allah Wants Us to Deal with a Major Pandemic or Major Illness. I hope we can learn some few things from this video. Without wasting so much time, let's get to the video.
Dear Muslims, the entire world is talking about this potential plague, this coronavirus that is taking place. And so I thought that inshallah in today's khutbah, let us look at some of the wisdoms we can derive, some of the morals and lessons that we can learn from what we see around us. For the believer always looks at the wisdom. The believer always tries to derive benefit from every single aspect around him. And today's khutbah, inshallah ta'ala, I will summarize 7 benefits and 7 lessons that all of us can learn from what is going on around us. The first of these 7, to make us humble and to realize that none of us is powerful and only Allah Azza wa Jal is all powerful. No human is superhuman. No human is almighty. All of us are under the control of a powerful Rabb. Look at this virus, the largest country in the world in terms of population, and that is China. The most powerful country in the history of humanity, and that is our country America. All over the world, all nations, mighty and weak. The entire human race is in terror. Doesn't matter where they're from. And what are they terrified at? They're terrified at the smallest of the small. They're terrified at something that is a manifestation of life. In fact, scientists even wonder, is the virus technically alive, or is it something between life and death? And the virus is the smallest manifestation of any creation. It is around 20 to 30 nanometers in length. To even look at it, we cannot even look at it with a normal microscope. We only can see it from a special type of microscope called an electron microscope. And the electron microscope does not bounce light off of the object. It bounces electrons off of the object. And to give you an idea of how small this virus is, to give you an idea of what is causing all of mankind to be terrified at something so minuscule, just to see this virus, we need to magnify it at least 100,000 times. Now, to put that in perspective, to give you an idea, if we were to take a grain of rice, just a rice seed, if we were to take a grain of rice and expand it 100,000 times, that grain of rice would be as large as 5 or 6 football fields. This is just to see the virus. You have to expand it 100,000 times. From this virus, all of us, mankind, are terrified. What does this show us? That there is indeed a Rabb. That despite all of our technology, despite all that we have come, we are not masters of our own destiny. We do not even control our own lives, much less the lives of others. How can we not humble ourselves in front of Subhan al-Khaliq, the one who creates everything, the one whom Allah Azza wa Jal mentions in the Quran about himself, وَيَخْلُقُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. He creates that which you cannot even know, you don't even understand. That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first of these lessons is to make us realize there is a Rabb, and the Rabb is in charge of us. The second,
Now, before we go to the second point, for what do we actually learn from this first point? There's more than three things we can learn from this first point. The first thing we are learning is that Allah is the best of creators. There is a powerful Almighty. That is the first thing we are learning from this video. And the second thing we are learning is that Allah is the master of science. You know, we have scientists in this world, but Allah is the master of scientists. Now imagine if the virus we are currently fearing and we are all in our rooms and hiding, if it is magnified 10,000 times, that's when you can actually see it. And he has given the example of a seed of rice. If it is magnified 10,000 times, the way the virus has to be magnified, then it will look more like a 6 football stadium. Imagine 6 football stadium. That's the magnification. In order for us to see the virus, and we are terrified of that small creation of Allah. This is actually humbling. We need to be humble. And also, as the scientists say, we need to be humble. Science also humbles us a lot.
Of the 7 lessons that we can benefit from is to appreciate that life and death are real. Why? Because all too often we ignore death. All too often we become so comfortable in this dunya. We start living the life. We start enjoying the material pleasures. We become complacent of the riches that we have. We become engrossed to such an extent that we become heedless that this dunya is not the end all and be all. And these types of calamities, these types of tragedies, it is a wake-up call that no one lives forever. وَمَا جَعَلْنَا لِبَشَرٍ مِّن قَبْلِكَ الْخُلْدِ. No human has been given immortality. Every one of us dies. إِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ وَإِنَّهُمْ مَيِّتُونَ كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ. Every single soul shall die. Just because we ignore it, just because we don't think about it, it does not change the reality of life and death. الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ. Allah is the one who created death and He created life. When these plagues come and when death surrounds us, we become more cognizant. Our hearts that might have been hard become soft. Our minds who only think of the dunya, we start thinking of the akhirah. And if this type of calamity makes our hearts that were hard soft, then this is a blessing and not a calamity. If this calamity wakes us up from the slumber of the dunya and makes us realize that all of life is temporary, then it is wallahi not a calamity, but it is a blessing in disguise. This is the second benefit we gain from our mortality. Life is not permanent. Death is around the corner. As Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu said, every single day we all wake up and death is closer to us than our shoe strap that is on our toe. Our death is closer to us. Every day we wake up and we do not know when we are going to die. So these types of calamities rub the point home that life is not eternal and only Allah Azza wa Jal knows when we are going to die. The third blessing we can see.
Before we move on to the third blessing or the third lesson we can learn from this video, from the second point, what basically it is that Allah the Almighty has created both life and death, and we as believers, we have to be always aware of life and death. And if somebody always remembers death, and then it gives you some kind of fear that one day you are going to return to the Almighty, and if you return to the Almighty, there is going to be judgment. So it kinds of gives you some set of morals, and you try to act right. By acting right, I mean you follow the commandments of Allah and you try to do the right things. So I think the next benefit from this illness that we are currently facing is that it can remind you of death. And if you are reminded, I hope it also soften your heart, and you come back to Allah and you worship Him the best way is supposed to be worshipped.
The wisdom that we can extract from what we see around us is the notion that some people are better than others, and the fact that this virus attacks all of humanity equally. it really shows us the foolishness of the superiority complex, the foolishness of racism, the foolishness of thinking my race, my people, my nation state is better than anyone else. No, this virus is attacking all of humanity equally. All classes, the rich and the poor, all ethnicities, the white and the black and the yellow and the brown, all socio-economic privileges gone. Every single human is equally human. كلكم من آدم وآدم من تراب. Anybody who feels that because I have a certain background, or because my bank account has more, or because my nationality, because my passport, because my irq and my tribe and whatnot, all of this is thrown in the dust. Every one of us, our blood cells are exactly the same. We are all equally human, and all illusions that we create of superiority, of differences between us, all of this is shown to be foolish. And the message of Islam, that the only thing that really separates us is in the eyes of Allah, and that is through taqwa. In this world, we are all equally human. And so, this virus and the scare that it is generating, in fact, should make us realize the truth of our religion of Islam when it tells us that every one of us is equally human. All of us have come from the same origin, and our end result will be exactly the same. There is a beautiful nukta, or just an anecdote, and Allah knows if it's authentic or not, that is mentioned in our books of history, that once there was a tyrannical king. He was torturing, scholars and righteous people, and he was mocking a scholar in front of him. And as he was mocking, some flies came and irritated him, and he swatted these flies away. And he said, "Tell me, O alim, what is the wisdom of Allah creating flies? Flies are always pesky. Flies are always a nuisance." And so this alim responded, "Allah Azza wa Jal is using flies to humble the arrogant of His creation like you. The wisdom of having flies is to show you, O King, that you are still a human like I am." So this is what we see here, that this virus does not differentiate between prime minister. There was a minister of some country fell sick, and between peasant, between rich, between poor, between white, between black. Every one of us is equally affected because we are one in our humanity. The fourth wisdom that we can derive.
Now, before we go to the fourth wisdom, basically, from the third wisdom, or the major lesson we can take from the third wisdom, is that we are all human beings. We are all equal. Now, imagine if you are this type of person that you always feel you are better than others. You are kind of special. You have to be treated special. You look down on others. This disease can harm you. It must be a lesson to all of us. This disease attacks everybody. Everybody is terrified, from the rich to the poorest. All of us are terrified. Now, if this small disease is able to terrify all the human population, the entire world, now who are you to think that you are so special? Or you're better than the others, or your skin is better than the other skin, or your tribe is better than the other tribe, or your country is better than the other country. Okay, economically, whatever, we can have those differences, but as human beings, we are all equal. We can all be affected the same way. So we have to humble ourselves. If Allah says all of us are created from our Godfather Adam, that means we are all the same. So stop treating people as if they are less. This is another lesson we can learn from this.
From what we see around us is to show us that this dunya and the wealth that comes with it and the blessings that come with it is not an indication of success and happiness. No, not at all. Rather, the fact that people that seem to be innocent or good or righteous are struck with calamities, and the fact that people that might be evil or bad seem to be going scot-free, it makes us realize that this dunya is not the end. We must recognize that there's going to be hereafter. This virus, it seems to sometimes take innocent children, innocent people. Not just this virus, any calamity. Sometimes the righteous are affected, and sometimes the evil people are left. And this should make us reflect that whoever has this dunya doesn't mean that Allah is pleased with them. Whoever has this dunya taken away does not mean that Allah is angry with them. On the contrary, this dunya is not an indication that Allah loves you. As one of our scholars said, that this dunya is given to the one whom Allah despises and the one whom Allah loves. Doesn't matter. And this dunya is taken away from the one whom Allah despises and the one whom Allah loves. This world and all of the blessings associated with it are not the indication of success. They're not the indication of Allah's pleasure. Rather, it is the akhirah that is the full indication of Allah's pleasure. And Allah mentions in the Quran, وَاتَّقُوا فِتْنَةً لَا تُصِيبَنَّ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا مِنْكُمْ خَاصَّةً. Beware of the tragedy or of the fitna. Beware of the trial that is not only going to affect those who do wrong amongst you. This virus is spreading everywhere. It is the righteous and unrighteous. It is the good and the bad. It is the salih and the talih. All of them are being affected at equal. And it is our reaction that determines piety, not the affliction itself. Those of you who are suffering from any calamity or affliction, do not interpret it as Allah not being pleased with you. On the contrary, our Prophet ﷺ said, these plagues that you see, they are an adhab for some group of people and a rahmah for the believers. The same thing can be an adhab and the same thing can be a rahmah. Why? Because it is of this dunya. Money can be a punishment and money can be a blessing. Good health can be a type of punishment if you don't use it properly, and good health can be a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Now that's the end of the video. Couple of points from the last point he has made from this video. One thing we have to be clear of is that there is always a judgment day. That's one thing we have to be clear of. For a believer, for a Muslim, if you are a believer, you have to believe in the day of judgment. That means everything that we are doing in this world is temporary. It's temporary. Anything that you go through in this world is a trial from Allah, because Allah has already told us He's going to give us trials in so many different ways, in terms of hunger, in terms of sickness, in terms of loss of wealth, and you name it, because trials are always going to come. You are not always going to be that happy, and you are not always going to be that sad. So it's a balance. Allah has made a balance for us. So whatever comes to you, whether good or bad, is from Allah. For a believer, a calamity such as this, where we have currently a pandemic in the world, for a believer, it can be a blessing to you that you know it gets you closer to Allah, it gets you closer to God, it gets you closer to worshiping. You know, while for a non-believer, that this is going to be like a punishment. He's going to see it as if he's being distracted, he's not going through his life normally, you know, he's complaining and all that. Okay, it is not a good state to be in. Pray that Allah deliver us from this affliction. That's always my prayer. It is a pandemic that is affecting the whole of humanity. We pray to Allah that He delivers the whole world from this sickness. He guides our scientists, those who are able to do research. May Allah guide them. Make sure that our life is normalized. That means we come back to our daily life. We're able to go to our massages and pray 5 times a day. We're able to hold congregations and continue with normal life. We pray, inshallah. If you like this video, share it with a friend. You can watch it with a group of friends. I'm new to this reaction on YouTube. I'll be dropping some couple more videos, so I request you to subscribe to the channel, as I'll be continuing to engage my fans through this reaction, inshallah. Thank you for listening. Have a blessed day.